More than 7 decades after prisoner Corinne Sykes was sent to the electric chair, the death sentence for the young woman remains a subject of controversy. Could a small, fragile girl have truly committed such a cold-blooded murder? Was Sykes the real perpetrator, or was she wrongly convicted because of the color of her skin? On December 7th, 1944, Harry Wadlinger stopped by his home on the way to a golf game. He only intended to drop off a cut of meat he had just bought for dinner. But the moment he stepped inside, he sensed something was wrong. The front door was ajar, and the family dog was barking furiously. Harry called out, but there was no reply. As he walked through the house, he discovered a horrific scene in the bathroom. Freda Wadlinger was slumped over in the bathtub, covered in blood. The shower curtain was torn to shreds, indicating that the victim had fiercely fought back before being killed. Freda had 4 stab wounds to the chest, including a fatal one that pierced straight through her ribcage into her heart. That wasn't the most chilling detail of the crime. During the autopsy, investigators noticed deep cuts on Freda's fingers. One finger had been slashed down the bone, nearly severed. This suggested that she had desperately tried to wrest the knife away from her attack, but failed. All her jewelry and the household savings were missing. The brutal death of Freda Wadlinger, a wealthy white woman, immediately shocked the city of Philadelphia. Local news outlets eagerly seized on every tiny detail of the case to attract attention. A suspect was quietly identified, Corinne Sykes, a 20-year-old maid who had only been working for Freda for 3 days. A neighbor of Freda's reported seeing Sykes leaving the Wadlinger residence on the morning of the murder. The witness was confident in the identification, noting Sykes' small, thin frame as unmistakable. When police began investigating, they uncovered another suspicious detail. Sykes had been working at the Wadlinger home under a false name, Heloise Parker. Further digging into Sykes' background only heightened police suspicions. She had a limited education, a history of confrontations, and a criminal record. Just 6 months before taking the Maid job, Sykes had completed an 11-month prison sentence for shoplifting. Tracing her personal connections to police eventually found her hiding at her lover's home. Sykes offered no resistance when she was arrested on the very day the murder took place. She was immediately jailed without the option of bail. During the first 2 weeks of interrogation, the only words she consistently repeated to investigators were, "I didn't kill her." When asked who did kill Freda, Sykes remained silent. Then, unexpectedly, she confessed, admitting that she had acted alone, motivated by robbery. With such a detailed confession from the suspect, the court wasted little time. Corinne Sykes was convicted of the first-degree murder, deemed the sole perpetrator, and sentenced to death by electric chair. The youngest of 3 sisters, Corinne Sykes grew up in crushing poverty. Her parents endured grueling labor for meager wages, never enough to give her a proper education. Her life seemed hopeless, until a faint glimmer of hope appeared in the form of J.C. Kelly. Kelly was a bootlegger, twice Sykes' age. He prowled the seedy corners of Philadelphia in search of profit and had ties to organized crime in the city. Their paths crossed the first time when Sykes was wandering the streets, heartbroken after her father's recent death. Kelly invited her into the restaurant he owned for some barbecue, and Sykes was instantly smitten. At first, the relationship was strictly employer and employee. The restaurant was just a front for Kelly's illegal liquor business. Sykes earned $25 a week, plus another $10 if her mother came to work too. Kelly claimed to love her, words that a naive young girl with no romantic experience couldn't resist. Sykes was small, naive, and had never had a boyfriend before meeting Kelly. He was everything she thought she wanted: older, wealthy, and drove a fancy car. Despite her mother's warnings, she threw herself into the affair with a man 20 years her senior. As her mother had predicted, the bliss didn't last long. Kelly's bootlegging business began to falter as American men enlisted en masse to join World War II. The restaurant he ran, a front for his illegal liquor trade, was on the verge of shutting down. Faced with limited options, he chose to keep whispering sweet lies into the ears of the youngest and most naive employee he had. "I'll find you another job. Are you ready for it?" Kelly said to Sykes. Naturally, she blindly agreed. Kelly's plan was to place Sykes as a maid in the home of a wealthy local family. But to hide her criminal record, Sykes had to use a false name in order to get the job. Kelly enthusiastically drove her to work on her first day. Whether by accident or design, this gave him the opportunity to learn the layout and routines around the Woodlinger household. Initially, Kelly was also considered a key suspect in the case. But when Sykes learned that her lover had been temporarily detained for questioning as well, she quickly confessed to everything. She even placed her fingerprint on the statement, despite barely being able to read or write. In return, Kelly flatly denied any relationship with Sykes when he appeared in court. He even went as far as to claim he didn't know her at all. When Sykes was identified as the suspect in Freda Woodlinger's murder, a death sentence seemed almost inevitable for her. The prosecution may have been neglecting in dismissing J.C. Kelly as a suspect, but that largely stemmed from the racial prejudice of those who held power. The trial took place just 3 months after the brutal crime. The court-appointed defense attorney assigned to Sykes specialized only in car accident compensation disputes. Some investigators argued that Sykes was unlikely to be the killer because she was too small and frail to have struggled so violently with the victim. However, during the indictment process, the court deliberately ignored this point raised by the police. Sykes' stained uniform, the most crucial piece of physical evidence, was never presented in court. One investigator believed Sykes may have been involved, but not as the sole perpetrator. He stated that she couldn't have killed her employer without help. But instead of focusing on such evidence, the court steered the case toward highlighting its severity and horror. They repeatedly emphasized that this was the case of a poor black girl killing a rich white woman. Ephraim Lipwich, the prosecutor in charge of the case, even declared loudly in court, "There can be no lenience. She must be executed. If we don't do that, other maids will be willing to kill, knowing they won't face death." A year and 7 months after the trial, Sykes was set to the electric chair, leaving behind a vast emptiness filled with lingering controversy over an appealing crime. Within the 2 years between the time the crime occurred and Sykes' execution, the people of Philadelphia gradually changed their views. From initially condemning her as a cold-blooded, heartless murderer, they began to feel sympathy as more of the tragedy behind the case came to light. On the day Sykes' body was returned to her family, over 3,000 people took the streets to attend her funeral procession. Together, they raised donations to help the family give the young woman a proper farewell, in an open casket surrounded by hundreds of flowers. The rest of Kelly's life was marked by a constant cycle of crime and punishment, paying the price for the ruthless way he treated Sykes. According to police records, Kelly was repeatedly incarcerated for theft until his death. However, it's possible that neither Kelly nor Sykes were the true killers of Freda Woodlinger. Before he passed away, Harry Woodlinger admitted that he was, in fact, the one who had murdered his wife. However, this information has not been verified, as there is no official documentation to confirm the claim. More than 70 years have passed, yet the case of Corinne Sykes remains a painful scar in the history of the U.S. justice system. Behind the death sentence given to a small black girl lies a tangled portrait of racial prejudice, legal injustice, and the tragedy of lives abandoned by the system. Corinne may have committed the crime, or perhaps she was simply a victim of a biased society and a legal system not ready to confront the more complex truth beneath the surface. Regardless of who the actual killer was, one thing is certain: justice cannot be built on haste, lack of objectivity, and prejudice. And perhaps the most painful part of it all is not Corinne Sykes' death, but the fact that people never truly listened to her